Okay, this is Unit 1, Lesson 3. And it is rules for multiplying and dividing integers. This is much simpler than adding and subtracting integers because you really only have to remember or understand what the signs will make whenever multiplying or dividing two numbers. It's really very simple. So let's start at the top. Rules for multiplying and dividing integers. Multiply or divide as you normally would, but use the following rules for the final sign. Two positives, a positive and a positive, make a positive. This is always going to be true. Two negatives, a negative and a negative, make a negative. Make a positive. So let's fix that. Positive. Okay. Then a positive and a negative, plus and minus, or a minus and a plus, make a negative. That's all you have to remember for multiplying and dividing integers. That is only for multiplying and dividing integers. These rules don't always work. You might already see that. These rules don't always work for adding and subtracting. Okay, so it's two sets of rules. Adding and subtracting is a little bit more difficult. Multiplying and dividing is very simple. So let's go on to some examples here. So number 1, we've got a negative 2 times a negative 7. Well, if I look up here at my second note, two negatives make a positive. A negative times a negative make a positive. So that is going to be a positive, and 2 times 7, 14. And maybe even let's simplify it further. Let's just do the operation it's telling us to do first and then worry about the sign. Okay, so let's look at number 2. We've got a negative 3 times a negative 10. Well, what's 3 times 10? 30. A negative times a negative. It's a positive 30. Okay, let's look at number 3. We've got 3 times negative 8. Whenever you see a number in front of parentheses, it means multiplication. Always means multiplication. Well, let's worry about the operation first. 3 times 8, that's 24. We've got a positive 3, because if there's no sign in front of the number, it means it's positive. We don't always have to write the plus sign. And a positive times a negative, well, in our note number 3 up here, a positive and a negative makes the answer a negative. Let's do number 4. We've got a negative 4 times a positive 1. There's no negative in front of that 1, so it's a positive 1. 4 times 1 is 4. A negative times a positive is a negative. So pause the video and try to do the next 4 on your own. Okay, let's work through them. So number 5, 5 times 2, 10. Negative times a negative, well, if we look up at the top, our second note gives us a positive 10. Number 6, 3 times 15, that might be a little bit more difficult, but they're both positive, so that's going to be really easy. 3 times 15 is 45, and a positive times a positive gives us a positive 45. Let's look at number 7, that little dot between the 12 and the negative 4. That means multiplication also. Okay, you're going to see multiplication shown in different ways, and this is one of those other ways they show it. Well, 12 times 4 is 48, and a positive 12 and a negative times a negative 4. Positive times a negative, if we look up above at our notes, it's a negative 48. Number 8, 4 times 8. That's 32, and a negative times a negative is a positive 32. Now, dividing integers is the exact same thing. Exact same thing. You just divide and then figure out what the sign's going to be. Well, let's look at number 9. And one thing I want you to remember, find each quotient. That just means find the answer after dividing. Quotient is the answer for dividing. Product up here, that is the answer after multiplying. Okay, so number 9, 44 divided by 4. Well, that's an easy one because they're both positive, and 44 divided by 4 is 11, so it's a positive 11. Number 10, negative 180 divided by negative 6. Well, let's just worry about the operation first. 180 divided by 6. That's 30. Negative times a negative, or divided by a negative, is a positive. Okay, negative divided by negative is positive. We have two negatives. Number 11. Looks like we got two negatives again, so two negatives mean we're going to have a positive. 12 divided by 2 is 6. You can do this either way. You can figure out the sign first or second. Let's figure out the sign first on number 12. A negative 40 divided by a positive 5. We got a negative and a positive. That means we've got a negative answer. 40 divided by 5 is 8. Let's move on to number 13. Well, 120 is positive. The 10 is positive because there's no negative in front of it. If there's no negative in front of it, it is positive. So 120 divided by 10 is 12, and a positive divided by a positive is a positive. 14, we've got a positive 72 and a negative 2. Positive divided by a negative, we've got a positive and a negative. That gives us a negative answer. 72 divided by 2 is 36. Pause the video and try to do the next 4 on your own. Okay, I'm going to run through these really quick because hopefully you already tried them. Negative 16 divided by 8 is negative 2. Negative 27 divided by 3 is negative 9. Negative 21 divided by 7 is negative 3. 19 divided by negative 1 is negative 19. 19 divided by 1 is 19. All right? Let's move on to the applications. These are just the word problems portions. So Nina made 8 withdrawals from her bank account. Each withdrawal was for $20. What was the total change in her bank account? Well, she did 8 withdrawals, each time for $20. So that's 8 times 20. So we have 8, that's a positive 8, times 20. Well, what's 8 times 20? Oh, and she made withdrawals. So they were negative 20. She took out $20 every time. So that's a negative 20. So 8 times negative 20, that gives me a negative 160, and it was a negative $160. Okay? So there is the answer for that one. So the next one, the Tigers, a high school football team, lost 3 yards on each of their last 3 plays. What was their total change in yards? Well, if they lost 3 yards, that tells me that's minus 3. And they did it 3 times in a row. So that is the 3 plays times the negative 3 yards equals, well, 3 times 3 is 9, and a positive 3 times a negative 3 is negative 9. So it was negative 9 yards total that they lost. Okay? So go ahead, pause the video, and I want you to attempt the odd number problems on the back. 21, 23, 25, and 27. And that will be your work for this set of notes.